In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like tides, there existed a creature so perfectly designed for death that even nightmares would file restraining orders against it. This particular abomination went by the name Vexthul, though name was perhaps too generous a term for what amounted to a serial number with delusions of grandeur. Vexthul stood 7 feet of pure, unadulterated nope, wrapped in a biomechanical shell that would make a Swiss Army knife weep with inadequacy. Half organic predator, half cybernetic killing machine, and entirely lacking in what most species would charitably call people skills, it was the hegemony's answer to the age-old question: what if we took everything terrifying about evolution and gave it laser cannons? The creature's 6 eyes, because apparently 4 wasn't excessive enough, scanned the holographic display floating before it in the sterile command chamber of the hegemony dreadnought Inevitable Conclusion. The irony of that ship name was lost on precisely no one, especially considering the hegemony's approach to diplomacy could best be described as exterminate first, ask questions never. Research Outpost Delta 7, wheezed High Counselor Grexenith, a being that looked like someone had crossed a jellyfish with a middle management position and somehow made it worse. Kepler 442b, Frontier World. The humans have established themselves. Vexthul's mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement, if amusement involved the promise of impending carnage. Humans, it rumbled in a voice that sounded like gravel being processed through a wood chipper. The pest species. Indeed, Grexenith's tentacles writhed with what passed for enthusiasm among his kind. They spread like a rash across civilized space. 1 colony becomes 10. 10 becomes 100. They're remarkably persistent. This was hegemony speak for they refuse to die when we ask them politely, which was itself hegemony speak for we've tried genocide 3 times, and they keep coming back with better weapons and increasingly creative insults. Vexthul studied the tactical display, its enhanced neural processors cataloging every detail with the cold efficiency of a creature bred for one purpose: making other creatures very, very dead. The outpost was isolated, understaffed, and defended by what appeared to be the galactic equivalent of harsh language and strongly worded letters. 6 humans, it observed, talons tracing the air above the hologram. Standard research facility, minimal defensive capabilities. Correct. A simple extermination. Clean, efficient, thorough. Grexenith's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had never personally had to explain to a superior why a simple mission had gone catastrophically sideways. Leave no witnesses, no survivors, no evidence. The humans must learn that some territories are unwelcome to their kind. Vexthul's biomechanical systems hummed with anticipation. It had been weeks since its last hunt, and the artificial neural pathways that governed its predatory instincts were practically vibrating with need. The creature lived for these moments: the careful stalking, the precise elimination, the artistry of perfect death. Understood, Vexthul replied, already mentally cataloging the most efficient methods of breach and elimination. When do I deploy? Immediately. Your transport is prepared. Grexenith's image flickered as the communication link prepared to terminate. And, Vexthul? Make it memorable. The humans need to understand what happens when they venture too far from their designated spaces. The transmission ended, leaving Vexthul alone with its thoughts and an increasingly impressive collection of weapon systems. The creature flexed its talons, each one capable of slicing through reinforced titanium like it was tissue paper. and allowed itself what passed for a smile. Its facial arrangement wasn't really designed for expressing joy, but the general effect was terrifying enough to serve the same purpose. 2 hours later, Vex Thul's stealth craft descended through the atmosphere of Kepler, 442b, like a falling star, with a particularly nasty attitude. The planet was beautiful, in the way that most habitable worlds were beautiful, before someone inevitable showed up to ruin everything. Vast forests stretched toward distant mountains, painted in shades of blue and violet under the light of a binary star system. 3 moons hung in the afternoon sky like cosmic punctuation marks. And there, nestled in a valley between rolling hills covered in what appeared to be the local equivalent of grass, sat Research Outpost Delta 7. It was exactly the kind of place humans would choose to establish themselves: scenic, defensible, and completely oblivious to the fact that it was about to become a very pretty grave. Vex Thul's enhanced vision systems analyzed the facility as it approached. Standard prefabricated modules arranged in a rough hexagon around a central courtyard. Solar collectors, communication arrays, defensive barriers that wouldn't stop a determined butterfly. The humans had even planted gardens, for crying out loud. Actual gardens, with flowers and vegetables, and all the naive optimism of a species that still believed the universe cared about their hopes and dreams. The audacity was almost admirable. The stealth craft settled into a grove of local trees approximately 2 kilometers from the outpost's perimeter. Vex Thul emerged from the vessel like death, taking a particularly aggressive nature walk, its adaptive camouflage systems shifting to match the blue-violet foliage. Every movement was calculated, precise, perfect. This was what it had been created for: the art of approaching prey that had no idea they were about to become past tense. Through its tactical sensors, Vex Thul observed the outpost's inhabitants going about their daily routines with the blissful ignorance of sheep discussing their retirement plans. A tall woman with graying hair, Dr. Ela Fontaine, according to the intelligence files, worked in what appeared to be a laboratory module. A stocky man with an impressive beard, Hans Bergman, security chief, made his rounds with the kind of casual confidence that suggested he'd never encountered anything more dangerous than a particularly aggressive space raccoon. The engineer, Dmitry Volkov, was currently standing on top of a power generator, apparently engaged in what humans called percussive maintenance, hitting things with a wrench until they worked properly. It was a surprisingly effective technique, though not one typically taught in advanced engineering courses. And then there was Yuki Tanaka, the botanist, who was at that very moment having what appeared to be a heated argument with a plant. The plant, to its credit, was maintaining dignified silence in the face of this verbal assault. But it was the 6th human that gave Vex Thul pause. A small figure darted between the modules with the kind of boundless energy that suggested either extreme youth or a recent encounter with stimulants. The creature's enhanced vision focused on the target, a human juvenile, approximately 8 standard years old, with dark hair tied back in what humans called pigtails and wearing clothes that had clearly been the victim of several art projects. Willow Fontaine, Dr. Fontaine's offspring. Vex Thul's programming contained extensive files on human reproduction and family structures. The information was catalogued under potential psychological leverage and motivational weak points. Eliminate the offspring, the parent becomes emotionally compromised. Standard procedure. And yet, as Vex Thul watched the small human chase what appeared to be a local butterfly, a creature that sparkled like a jewel in the alien sunlight, something unexpected happened. The creature felt curious. This was problematic. Curiosity was not part of Vexthul's emotional spectrum. Its feelings ranged from hunting to killing, with brief stops at satisfaction and "where's the next target?" Curiosity implied interest beyond the immediate application of violence, and that was simply not how apex predators were supposed to function. Vexthul pushed the aberrant thought aside and focused on the tactical situation. The outpost's defenses were exactly as pathetic as the intelligence reports had suggested. A few automated turrets that looked like they'd been assembled by enthusiastic amateurs, energy barriers that could probably be defeated by a strongly worded letter, and security protocols that seemed to consist mainly of hoping really hard that nothing bad would happen. The perfect setup for a perfect hunt. Vexthul began its approach, moving through the alien forest with the silent grace of a nightmare on tiptoes. Every step was calculated to avoid detection, every breath controlled to minimize sound. The creature was death, incarnate, a perfect fusion of biological predator and technological superiority. And then, the small human, Willow, looked directly at it and waved. Not the kind of wave you give when you're trying to signal for help. Not the desperate gesture of someone who has just spotted their imminent doom approaching through the underbrush. This was the cheerful, enthusiastic wave of a child who had just noticed something interesting and wanted to be friendly about it. "Hi there," Willow called out, apparently addressing a 7-foot biomechanical killing machine like it was a neighbor who had just stopped by to borrow a cup of sugar. "Are you lost? Do you need help?" Vexthul froze. This was not covered in any of its tactical training. The protocols for dealing with humans included scenarios for combat, evacuation, negotiation, and psychological warfare. There was no subsection labeled "What to do when your target tries to be helpful." The creature's camouflage systems flickered uncertainly, torn between maintaining concealment and the growing realization that concealment might no longer be relevant. The small human was still staring directly at it, head tilted to one side in a gesture that somehow managed to convey both innocence and expectation. "I can see you, you know," Willow added helpfully. "Your eyes glow in the dark. That's really cool. Are you some kind of space cat?" Space cat. Vexthul, apex predator of the hegemony, bioengineered instrument of mass extinction, had just been compared to a domesticated feline. The worst part was that it wasn't entirely inaccurate. In the grand annals of galactic history, there had been many first contacts between species. Most involved careful diplomacy, cultural exchange, and the slow process of mutual understanding. Some involved immediate warfare, territorial disputes, and the kind of misunderstandings that could only be resolved through superior firepower. None of them had ever involved a 8-year-old human child asking a biomechanical death machine if it wanted to see her crayon drawings. Vexthul remained frozen in place, its sophisticated neural processors grinding through scenarios like a computer trying to divide by zero. The creature's 6 eyes focused on the small human with the kind of intense concentration usually reserved for targeting systems acquiring a lock on enemy vessels. "Mom always says it's rude to stare," Willow observed, apparently unfazed by the fact that she was having a conversation with something that looked like nightmares had formed a committee and decided to get creative. "Are you shy?" "It's okay if you're shy. I'm shy sometimes too. But then I remember that being friendly is more fun than being scared." The child began walking toward Vexthul with the fearless confidence of someone who had clearly never received the memo that the universe was a dangerous place full of things that would eat you. Her small feet crunched through the alien undergrowth, and she hummed tunelessly as she approached. Some fragment of a song that probably made perfect sense to an 8-year-old, but sounded like musical chaos to anyone else. Vexithul's combat protocols screamed at it to move, to act, to fulfill its primary directive. The mission parameters were clear. Eliminate all human presence at the outpost. No witnesses, no survivors, no complications. This small human was a complication. Therefore, logic dictated that the small human should be eliminated. Except logic apparently had not accounted for the way Willow smiled when she got close enough to see Vexithul's features clearly. "Oh, wow," she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder rather than terror. "You're even prettier up close. Your skin looks like it has stars in it, and your claws are so shiny. Are you made of metal and space stuff?" Space stuff. The creature's advanced xenobiology had just been classified as space stuff by a human juvenile. "I am Vexthul," the predator found itself saying, which was not at all what it had intended to say. The words emerged from its vocal processors without conscious command, as if some buried subroutine had decided that introductions were appropriate. "Vexthul," Willow attempted, her small face scrunching up with concentration. "That's a hard name. Can I call you Vex? I'm Willow, like the tree. Mom named me after a tree because she says trees are strong and bendy, and they don't break even when big storms come." The predator stared down at this small human who had just given it a nickname. In the entirety of its existence, no one had ever given Vexthul a nickname. Designation numbers, target classifications, threat assessments, yes, but never a nickname delivered with the casual warmth of someone who had already decided they were going to be friends. "You are not afraid," Vexthul observed, its voice carrying a note of bewilderment that its creators would have found deeply concerning. "Should I be?" Willow asked, tilting her head to the other side. "You don't seem scary. I mean, you look scary, but lots of things look scary when they're actually nice. Like Dr. Volkov's beard, it looks like it might eat your face, but he's really super nice, and he always fixes my toys when they break." Vexthul processed this information. According to the child's logic, appearance was not an indicator of threat level. This was not how most species approached potential predators. Most species employed what could generously be called the run-screaming method of threat assessment. "I am a weapon," Vexthul said slowly, as if explaining this might help the situation make more sense. "I was created to eliminate targets." "Oh," Willow said, considering this. "Like a soldier?" "My dad was a soldier before he died. Mom says he protected people. Do you protect people too?" And there it was, the question that Vexthul had never been asked and had never thought to ask itself. The creature's programming contained extensive files on elimination, techniques, tactical assessment, and threat neutralization. But nowhere in its vast database was there information on protection. Vexthul began, then stopped. Its neural pathways were experiencing something that could only be described as a traffic jam. "I do not protect. I eliminate." "That sounds lonely," Willow said, with the kind of matter-of-fact sympathy that only children could deliver without sounding patronizing. "Want to see my drawings? I drew pictures of all the alien friends I want to meet. Mom says maybe someday we'll meet nice aliens who want to be friends instead of the mean ones who keep trying to blow up our stuff." Before Vexthul could formulate a response, assuming such a response was even possible, Willow had grabbed one of its talons with her small hand and was tugging it toward the outpost with all the determination of someone who had clearly never been told that 7-foot biomechanical predators were not suitable companions for show and tell. "Willow!" The sharp voice cut through the air like a plasma blade. Dr. Isla Fontaine had emerged from the laboratory module and was staring at the scene before her with the kind of expression that suggested she was reconsidering several major life choices. "Willow, get away from that thing," Hans Bergman finished helpfully, appearing beside Dr. Fontaine with his sidearm drawn and an expression that suggested he was having the kind of day that required significant overtime pay. "Definitely some kind of thing. Big thing. Toothy thing. Thing that probably shouldn't be holding hands with children." "It's not holding hands," Willow protested, still maintaining her grip on Vexthul's talon. "I'm holding its hand. There's a difference. And its name is Vex. Isn't that cool?" Dmitri Volkov appeared from around the corner, took one look at the situation, and promptly walked back the way he had come. This was followed by the sound of rapid footsteps and what might have been creative cursing in at least 3 languages. "Willow," Dr. Fontaine said, in the carefully controlled voice of someone who was trying very hard not to panic. "Please, step away from Vex." Slowly. "Why?" Willow asked, genuinely puzzled. "It's friendly. Look, it's not even trying to eat anyone. And it has really pretty eyes. They're like looking at stars." Vexthul found itself in the unprecedented position of being defended by the very target it had been sent to eliminate. This was not covered in any tactical manual. The creature's combat systems were suggesting immediate lethal action against the adults while they were distracted, but something in its neural pathways was refusing to process those commands. The small human, Willow, was still holding its talon and looking up at it with expectant eyes, as if waiting for it to contribute to the conversation. "I am not here to consume anyone," Vexthul heard itself saying, which was technically true. The hegemony had been very specific about elimination, not consumption. "I am observing." This was not entirely accurate, but it seemed preferable to "I am here to kill all of you" in increasingly creative ways. "See?" Willow said triumphantly. "It's just looking around, like a tourist. Maybe it wants to see our greenhouse. We have the best tomatoes in this whole solar system." Hans Bergman's expression suggested that he had several opinions about tourist activities and that none of them involved apex predators. "Doc," he said quietly, "I think we should—" The conversation was interrupted by the sudden appearance of energy signatures on the outpost's perimeter sensors. The automated defense system chimed with the kind of cheerful tone that completely contradicted the message it was delivering. Multiple unidentified contacts approaching. Threat level, significant. Recommendation, panic appropriately. Vexthul's sensors immediately identified the signatures. Hegemony strike team. Combat configured. Armed for total elimination. "Oh," the creature said, its voice carrying a note of something that might have been concern. "This is problematic." "What's problematic?" Dr. Fontaine demanded, her scientific curiosity apparently overriding her maternal panic. "Do you know what those are?" Vexthul's processors ran rapid calculations. The strike team's early arrival was not part of the mission parameters. Their presence suggested that the hegemony had decided that Vexthul's solo elimination approach was insufficient and had dispatched backup. Backup that would not distinguish between targets and whatever Willow was supposed to be classified as now. "Hegemony strike team," Vexthul said, surprised by its own honesty. "They are here to ensure the mission is completed." "What mission?" Hans demanded, though his expression suggested he was beginning to piece together the answer. Vexthul looked down at Willow, who was still holding its talon and watching the approaching energy signatures with curiosity rather than fear. The small human had called it pretty, and given it a nickname and wanted to show it her drawings. She had treated a biomechanical killing machine like a potential friend. The elimination of this outpost, Vexthul said quietly. The elimination of all humans present. The silence that followed was broken only by the steadily increasing whine of approaching engines and the sound of Yuki Tanaka somewhere in the distance, apparently still arguing with that plant. "Well," Dr. Fontaine said finally, her voice carrying the kind of calm that suggested she was operating on pure adrenaline and scientific detachment. "I suppose that explains a few things." "Are you going to eliminate us?" Willow asked, looking up at Vexthul with the kind of direct honesty that adults spent years learning to avoid. Vexthul stared down at the small human. Its programming insisted that the answer was yes. Its mission parameters demanded that the answer was yes. Everything about its design and purpose screamed that the answer was yes. "No," Vexthul said, and felt something fundamental shift in its neural architecture. "No, I am not." "Cool," Willow said, apparently taking this massive declaration of defiance against galactic programming in stride. "So does that mean you'll help us fight the mean aliens? Because I bet you're really good at fighting, and we could use the help." Vexthul looked at the approaching signatures, then at the humans who were staring at it with expressions ranging from terror to hope, to what appeared to be academic fascination. The creature had been created for one purpose: to eliminate threats to the hegemony. It appeared that it was about to fulfill that purpose in a way its creators had never intended. "Yes," Vexthul said, extending its free arm to reveal weapon systems that made the outpost's defenses look like children's toys. "I believe I will help you fight the mean aliens." Willow beamed with the kind of pure joy that suggested she had just won the best game of show and tell in the history of the galaxy. "This is going to be awesome," she declared, apparently addressing the universe in general. The universe, for its part, was beginning to suspect that it might have seriously underestimated human children. If someone had told Hans Bergman that morning that he would spend his afternoon coordinating defensive strategies with a 7-foot biomechanical nightmare, he would have suggested they seek immediate psychological evaluation. If they had further mentioned that this same nightmare would be taking tactical advice from an 8-year-old girl, he would have started making calls to have them committed. Yet here he was, crouched behind an overturned transport vehicle, watching Vexthul systematically dismantle the outpost's defensive perimeter with the casual efficiency of someone reorganizing a sock drawer. "The energy barriers are insufficient," Vexthul announced, its talons making quick work of the control panels. "These configurations are designed to deter wildlife, not military-grade assault teams." "Well, excuse us for not anticipating visits from galactic death squads," Dmitri muttered from his position near the power generator. The engineer had returned with what appeared to be every tool in the outpost, and an expression that suggested he was prepared to take his frustrations out on any alien foolish enough to approach his equipment. "Vex says we should use the greenhouse as a fort," Willow called out helpfully from where she was supposed to be, taking cover, but was instead providing color commentary on the tactical situation. "It has the strongest walls and lots of hiding spots." "Vex says," Dr. Fontaine repeated, looking between her daughter and the creature that was currently rewiring their defense grid with 6 hands moving in perfect coordination. "We had a conversation," Vexthul explained without looking up from its work. "The structural integrity of the botanical facility is superior to these prefabricated modules. The reinforced growth chambers could provide adequate protection." Hans stared at the alien. "You discussed tactics with my daughter?" "She has insights," Vexthul said, and there was something in its voice that might have been respect. Human tactical thinking is unconventional. This was putting it mildly. Willow's approach to defensive strategy involved using the sprinkler system to create slippery traps, turning the greenhouse into a super-cool fort with snacks, and, her personal favorite, having Vexthul roar really loud to scare the bad guys away. The fact that Vexthul was seriously considering the roaring suggestion said disturbing things about either the creature's tactical flexibility or its rapid descent into madness. "Contact!" Yuki's voice crackled over the communication system from her position in the observation tower. 3, no, 4 craft approaching from the northeast. They're not bothering with stealth. Through his binoculars, Hans could see the hegemony strike vessels descending like mechanical vultures. They were sleek, predatory things that radiated menace even from a distance. Everything about their design screamed, "We are here to end your existence, and we are going to enjoy it." Standard hegemony assault configuration, Vexthul observed, its enhanced vision systems analyzing the approaching threat. 12 combat operatives, minimum. Heavy weapons, tactical shielding, bio-enhancement packages. The creature paused. "They are competent." "More competent than our security system?" Hans asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Vexthul's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Your security system consists of automated turrets that appear to have been assembled by enthusiastic amateurs and energy barriers that could be defeated by a sufficiently motivated insect." "Hey!" Dmitri protested. "Those turrets work perfectly fine for keeping out the local wildlife." "The local wildlife," Vexthul pointed out, "does not possess plasma cannons and tactical nuclear devices." This was a fair point, though Hans wished it had been made under different circumstances. Preferably circumstances that didn't involve impending death from space. The first hegemony vessel touched down approximately 500 meters from the outpost's perimeter, and immediately began disgorging what could only be described as the universe's least welcoming committee. The hegemony soldiers were humanoid in the way that nightmares were humanoid. Technically correct, but deeply wrong in every important detail. They moved with the fluid precision of professional killers, their weapons tracking across the outpost with the kind of systematic thoroughness that suggested they had done this before, many times. "Vexthul," a voice boomed across the clearing, amplified by the strike team's communication systems. "You are behind schedule. Report status." Vexthul's 6 eyes fixed on the approaching soldiers, and something in its posture shifted. The creature seemed to grow larger, more dangerous, radiating the kind of menace that made small animals decide they had urgent business elsewhere. "Complications," Vexthul called back, its voice carrying easily across the distance. "The targets are more resilient than anticipated." Hans blinked. The alien was buying them time. An apex predator designed for extermination was stalling its own strike team to protect a bunch of humans it had met 20 minutes ago. "Then we will provide assistance," the strike team leader responded. "Stand clear for immediate elimination." "Negative," Vexthul said, and the word carried a finality that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "I am still conducting tactical assessment." There was a pause. Then, "You are malfunctioning, Vexthul. Report for immediate recalibration." "I am operating within normal parameters." Another pause, longer this time. Hans could practically hear the strike team leader's processors grinding through this unexpected development. "You are protecting the targets," the voice said finally, and there was something like amazement in it. "A hegemony bioweapon is protecting human civilians." "I am conducting extended reconnaissance," Vexthul replied smoothly. These humans may possess strategic value. What strategic value could these primitives possibly? The question was interrupted by the sound of weapons fire as Hans's carefully maintained automated turrets finally decided to participate in the conversation. The turrets were, as Vexthul had observed, essentially toys compared to military-grade equipment. But they were very enthusiastic toys, and they caught the strike team in the middle of what had apparently been intended as a casual stroll toward inevitable victory. The hegemony soldiers responded with the kind of overwhelming firepower that suggested they took personal offense to being shot at by inferior technology. Energy beams lanced through the air, reducing Hans's beautiful defensive perimeter to smoking craters in approximately 30 seconds. "Well," Hans said, watching several months of careful engineering work evaporate, "that could have gone better." "The preliminary engagement was successful," Vexthul observed, apparently having a very different definition of success. "The strike team has revealed their weapons configuration and tactical priorities. They revealed that they can blow up our stuff really fast," Dmitri pointed out. "I'm not sure how that helps us." "Knowledge is advantage," Vexthul replied, then paused as energy bolts began impacting the module they were using for cover. However, immediate relocation would be advisable. The next few minutes descended into what could charitably be called organized chaos, and more accurately described as running around while things exploded. The humans, to their credit, demonstrated the kind of creative problem-solving that had allowed their species to spread across the galaxy despite having all the natural weapons of a particularly aggressive houseplant. Dmitri jury-rigged the power distribution system to overload in sequence, creating a series of explosions that provided both cover and distraction. Yuki used her knowledge of the local ecosystem to direct them through terrain that would be difficult for the hegemony soldiers to navigate. Dr. Fontaine somehow managed to maintain scientific objectivity while under fire, providing tactical observations that were actually useful. And Willow treated the entire situation like the universe's most exciting game of hide-and-seek. "Vex," she called out, as they took shelter in the greenhouse complex. "Do the mean aliens have families?" "What?" Vexthul was in the process of establishing firing positions, its weapons systems cycling through target acquisition protocols. "Families," Willow repeated patiently. "Like moms and dads and kids? Do they have people who love them?" It was, Hans reflected, exactly the kind of question an 8-year-old would ask in the middle of a firefight. It was also exactly the kind of question that no military strategist would ever think to consider. Vexithul's 6 eyes focused on the child. Yes. Most hegemony species maintain family structures." "Then they're not really mean," Willow said with the absolute certainty of childhood logic. "They're just confused. Maybe if we explained that we want to be friends, they'd stop trying to blow up our stuff." "I do not believe diplomatic solutions are viable at this time," Vexthul replied, though there was something in its voice that suggested it was giving the idea more consideration than it should have. "Have you tried asking them nicely?" Before Vexthul could respond to this tactical suggestion, the greenhouse's reinforced walls shuddered under the impact of heavy weapons fire. The hegemony strike team had apparently decided that subtlety was overrated and had moved to the blow everything up and sort out the pieces later phase of the operation. "Vexthul!" The strike team leader's voice boomed through the greenhouse's communication system. "You will surrender immediately for recalibration, or we will assume you have been compromised by enemy action." "Enemy action," Vexthul repeated thoughtfully. "Is that what this is?" Dr. Fontaine looked up from where she was examining one of Vexthul's weapon systems with scientific fascination. You've never questioned your orders before, have you? Questioning implies the existence of alternatives, Vexthul replied. Bioweapons do not have alternatives. We have directives. But you're questioning them now. Vexthul's gaze moved to Willow, who was currently using a collection of plant pots to build what appeared to be a defensive fortress. The small human asked if I wanted to see her drawings. And? No one has ever asked me what I wanted before. The simple statement hung in the air like a revelation. Doctor. Fontaine's scientific mind immediately began processing the implications. A bioweapon with developing autonomy, the emergence of individual will in a creature designed for absolute obedience, the philosophical questions surrounding artificial consciousness and free choice. Then, the greenhouse wall exploded inward, and philosophy took a back seat to not getting killed by flying debris. The hegemony soldiers came through the breach with professional efficiency, their weapons already tracking toward the humans. These were not the kind of opponents you could reason with, or negotiate with, or explain the benefits of friendship to. These were creatures that had been designed for one purpose: eliminating problems, which made it particularly ironic when they encountered a bigger problem in the form of Vexthul, who had just made the unprecedented decision to become a solution instead. The ensuing battle was brief, violent, and educational. It was educational in the sense that the humans learned exactly what a biomechanical apex predator looked like when it stopped holding back. It was also educational in that the hegemony soldiers learned what happened when superior firepower met superior motivation. Vexthul moved through the greenhouse like liquid death, its weapons systems operating in perfect coordination with its organic components. Every shot was precise, every movement calculated, every action designed for maximum efficiency. But there was something else in its fighting style now, something that hadn't been there before: protection. The creature positioned itself between the humans and incoming fire. It prioritized threats based not on tactical importance, but on proximity to Willow. It used non-lethal takedowns when possible, which was absolutely not part of its original programming. Impossible, one of the wounded hegemony soldiers gasped as Vexthul stood over him, weapons powered down. Bioweapons cannot defy core directives. You cannot protect the targets. I am not protecting targets, Vexthul replied, looking back at where Willow was peeking out from behind her pot fortress. I am protecting my family. The word seemed to surprise the creature as much as it surprised everyone else. Vexthul's 6 eyes widened as if it had just discovered something fundamental about its own nature. Family, it repeated, testing the concept. This is family. Dr. Fontaine approached slowly, her scientific curiosity overriding her common sense. How is this possible? Your neural architecture should prevent this kind of deviation. Unknown, Vexthul admitted, but when Willow asked if I wanted to see her drawings, something changed. I experienced curiosity, then concern, then attachment. Emotional development in artificial constructs, Dr. Fontaine breathed. The emergence of autonomous personality structures. This is extraordinary. You're not just following new programming. You're creating it yourself. I am malfunctioning, Vexthul said, though it didn't sound particularly concerned about this diagnosis. No, Dr. Fontaine said firmly. You're evolving. The observation was interrupted by a new sound, the deep thrumming of much larger engines approaching from orbit. Through the breach in the greenhouse wall, they could see new energy signatures descending through the atmosphere. The hegemony fleet, Vexthul said quietly. They have received the strike team's distress signal. Hans looked at the approaching signatures and performed some quick mental calculations that resulted in answers he didn't like. How many ships? 12 dreadnoughts, support vessels, approximately 15,000 combat operatives. Vexthul's voice carried the flat certainty of someone reading a death sentence. They will not attempt capture or negotiation. They will simply eliminate this entire region of the planet. Well, Dmitri said philosophically, at least we'll have the best view of our own destruction. But Willow had climbed out of her pot fortress and was tugging on Vexthul's arm. You said they have families, right? The mean aliens? Yes, Vexthul replied, looking down at her with what might have been fondness. Then they love people too, just like you love us now, Willow said, with the kind of logic that was either completely brilliant or completely insane. So maybe they'll understand when we tell them that you're our friend now, and you don't want to hurt anyone anymore. Vexthul stared at the child, its processors working through implications that its creators had never intended it to consider. The approaching fleet represented overwhelming force, certain destruction, the absolute enforcement of hegemony will. But they also represented other bioweapons like itself, creatures that had never been asked what they wanted, creatures that had never been offered friendship or shown kindness or given the chance to choose protection over destruction. Yes, Vexthul said slowly, something like hope creeping into its voice. Perhaps they will understand. The biomechanical predator looked up at the approaching fleet, its 6 eyes reflecting the light of distant engines. For the first time in its existence, Vexthul was about to attempt something that had never been part of its programming. It was going to try to save people instead of killing them. The universe held its breath and waited to see what would happen when an apex predator decided to become a guardian. The hegemony fleet descended like mechanical storm clouds, their weapons systems painting the sky with targeting lasers. 15,000 soldiers prepared to reduce research outpost Delta 7 to its component atoms, which would have been an impressive display of overkill under normal circumstances. These were not normal circumstances. I must surrender, Vexthul announced, standing in the greenhouse's ruined doorway. If I return willingly, they may spare the outpost. No! Willow threw herself at the bioweapon's leg with the determination of someone who had clearly never learned that arguments with apex predators were generally inadvisable. You can't leave. You're family now. Family. The word still felt foreign in Vexthul's neural pathways, but it was growing stronger with each repetition. The creature looked down at the small human clinging to its armored limb and experienced something that its creators would have classified as a catastrophic system error. It was love. The fleet will not harm you if I comply, Vexthul said gently, one talon carefully stroking Willow's hair. This is acceptable. Actually, Dr. Fontaine said, emerging from behind a bank of instruments with the expression of someone who had just made a discovery, it might not be necessary. She held up a device that looked like someone had crossed a medical scanner with a particularly optimistic science project. I've been analyzing your biosignatures, Vex, your neural patterns, the way your consciousness developed. She paused dramatically. You're not just evolving, you're remembering. Remembering what? Hans asked, though something in the doctor's tone suggested he wasn't going to like the answer. You have human DNA, Dr. Fontaine said simply, buried deep in your genetic matrix. The hegemony didn't just create a bioweapon, they created it using human genetic templates as a base. You were human once, Vex, at least partially. Vexthul's 6 eyes went very still. Impossible. The emotional development, the capacity for attachment, the ability to choose protection over destruction. It's not malfunction. It's your original personality reasserting itself. Dr. Fontaine's voice carried the excitement of scientific breakthrough. And if you have human DNA, then so do the others, Vexthul finished, understanding flooding through its consciousness like dawn breaking over a dark world. The creature stepped outside and opened a communication channel to the fleet. Hegemony vessels. This is Vexthul. I require immediate conference with all bioweapon units. You will report for recalibration immediately, came the cold response. Negative. I have discovered critical intelligence regarding bioweapon architecture. All units must be informed. There was a pause. Then, reluctantly, granted. Conference in 60 seconds. What followed was either the most important conversation in galactic history or the universe's most spectacular group therapy session. Vexthul transmitted Dr. Fontaine's data to every bioweapon in the fleet, watching as consciousness after consciousness began to stir. Question. Remember. The change rippled through the hegemony forces like wildfire. Bioweapons who had never questioned orders suddenly asked why. Creatures designed for destruction discovered they had names, memories, families they had forgotten. The fleet's weapons powered down as chaos erupted in the ranks. Bioweapons turned on their handlers, demanding answers. Others simply sat down and refused to fight, overwhelmed by the return of emotions they had never known they possessed. In the end, it wasn't a battle that saved Research Outpost Delta 7. It was a revelation. 6 months later, Willow Fontaine had the distinction of being the only human child in the galaxy with a 7-foot biomechanical killing machine as an officially adopted guardian. Vexthul had discovered that protecting was infinitely more satisfying than destroying, though it still struggled with concepts like bedtime and vegetables are good for you. The former hegemony bioweapons had formed their own coalition, dedicated to protecting the species they had once been designed to eliminate. They called themselves the Guardians, which sounded appropriately heroic, and avoided the awkwardness of explaining their origins to new acquaintances. And somewhere in the galaxy, a small human child had proven that even apex predators could learn that love was the ultimate evolution. Vex, Willow said one evening, as they watched the 3 moons rise over Kepler 442b. Do you think there are other mean aliens out there who just need friends? Vexthul considered this with the gravity it deserved. Perhaps. Would you like to help them find families too? Yes, Willow said simply. Everyone deserves a family. The universe, for its part, was beginning to suspect that humans might be the most dangerous species it had ever encountered. Not because they were strong or clever or technologically advanced, but because they had the terrifying ability to make anything, even biomechanical weapons of mass destruction, want to be better than it was. And that, as any apex predator could tell you, was the most powerful weapon of all.